And this is the Central Pennsylvania Lesbian and Gay History Project. And the project is recording information about life in Central Pennsylvania over the history of LGBT people in the community. My name is Mary Merriman. I'm the interviewer. And I am interviewing on the right Reverend Arlene Ackerman. And on the left, Jacquie Ackerman. The interview date is August 17th, and we are at their home. And again, we've got permission to do the interview, and then you do have the right to decide how the interview is used and preserved and all that kind of stuff at any point. Okay?
Okay.
All right, so let's get started. Arlene, if we can start with you, just name, date of birth, parents, siblings, that kind of, just basic information, as much as you understand.
My name is Arlene Ackerman. I was born in San Francisco, raised in Central California, and in pastoring I've lived in numerous places with Metropolitan Community Church, and for the last, how long?
22 years.
22 years we've lived here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Okay. And can you tell us a little, your date of birth?
February 22nd, 49.
Okay. And how about a little bit about your parents, siblings?
I have one sister who lives in Sacramento, California. My parents are both deceased, both of German descent, and they were first generation folks in this country.
Okay. And what country did they come from? Were they German also?
My parents were German, of German descent. My mother was of German descent, but born in Russia.
Okay. All right. And
I should say, and I'm adopted.
okay. Thank you. And when were you adopted?
I was adopted at the age of 3 months.
Okay.
In San Francisco, and then raised in Lodi, California.
Okay. All right. And Jacquie, just your name, date of birth?
Jacquie Bogle Ackerman. I was born in August of 49 in northern Minnesota. My parents were European descent, but second or third generation in this country.
And what kind of work did your parents do?
My father was worked in the mines, in the iron mines in northern Minnesota, and did whatever work he could on the side. He hung wallpaper and did what he had to earn an income. My mother was a teacher, but didn't get her degree until I was 13, but she started teaching when she was 19 or 20. At that time, all she had to do was go through 1 or 2 years of teacher's training in northern Minnesota, and she was the only one of her 8 siblings that went to high school even. And she had to go around this small town and have a petition signed for them to pay for a school teacher in order to get her first job.
Mm-hmm.
They both are gone. My dad died in 1960 and my mother in 1991.
Okay. And siblings?
I had 3 brothers, 2 brothers and a sister. Both my brothers are now gone. My sister lives in California, in San Diego.
Okay. I'm going to continue with you, Jacquie, and just get through some of the history piece and then pick up with Arlene, because I think going back and forth is probably a little hard. How far did you go through school?
I have a bachelor's degree, and I took some graduate courses.
Okay.
And that's Ricky.
And that's Ricky. We are accompanied by 2 dogs. How about religious background?
I was raised in initially we went to the Baptist church, and then after my dad and my brother died, we went to the Presbyterian church when it was just my mom and I. And then when I got into college, I didn't go to any church. I kind of explored different religions and all Christian, and then found MCC in the late 70s, and have been involved in MCC ever since.
Okay, and again, clarifying, MCC as Metropolitan Community Church.
Right.
Why the switch to MCC? What made the connection?
Well, because MCC, by that time I had come out and figured out that I was a lesbian, and many of the other churches were not accepting of me because of that, and MCC was fairly new at that time, but its outreaches to the gay and lesbian community, it felt like a place I could actually be comfortable and be myself.
Okay. And how about coming out? How did that, were you out in your family?
No, I came out in college, and that was just a process. It was actually, my aha moment was when my roommate, with whom I was never romantically or intimately involved, informed me kind of in the middle of the night one night that she and some others in the dorm thought that I was going down the wrong path. And when I asked her what that meant, and she explained, I said, internally I thought, that's what I am. Yay! I had a label.
Yes.
So, and it was a liberating moment at that time, because I hadn't had a lot of homophobic stuff growing up.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't something I had experienced.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. How about occupation? What are you doing?
I do whatever I have to make a living. Since I've been with Arlene, she's been a pastor since we've been together, and it's been 34 years now. And so I go where her career takes her. And so I've driven transit buses, and I've done a lot of accounting and office work. Right now I drive school bus, and I'm semi-retired from most of the other things. And I knit a little bit on the side.
Okay. Arlene, I'm going to flip back some of these questions, get through the rest of the history piece with you. And you had talked a little bit about being adopted at 3 months old. In terms of your family of origin, can you talk a little bit about the experience of growing up? At 3 months, you're not quite aware of any changes, or are you?
I was pretty clear in about, it was kindergarten or first grade. The story goes that in class one day the teacher asked, "Who in your family do you look like?" And I thought about it, and everyone else seemed to know who they looked like in their family, and I was very clear the only one I looked like in my family was the parakeet.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because I have a crooked nose. It's better now, but back then it was very crooked, and our parakeet's nose was very crooked. And of course it made everyone giggle, as it is some people in this room. And but it also raised a big question for this little kid. So I went home and said, "Mom, why is it I don't look like anybody in my family?" And my mom explained, well, she said, "You know, we've always told you that you're adopted." That was the very first time I remember hearing those words. And so that really put me in kind of a whirlwind. I wish my parents would have talked more about it. both in before I asked and then after I asked. After I made that one inquiry, it was hard to get my parents to talk about it. Now, if you go back in time, this was the 60s or the 50s, and you didn't, and especially in German community, you don't talk about feelings much. You don't, you just don't share a lot about family, history, what you went through. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until many years later I was able to get my mom to talk much more openly about the situation.
Okay. And were you able to talk with siblings about that at all, or?
Well, my one sister, who was also adopted, we are not blood sisters at all, but when I went to my sister, who's 4 years older, she simply had no interest at all in being adopted. And she had, therefore, no interest in talking to me about it. So it really felt like I was shut off. And I desperately, as a kid, wanted to know. Mm-hmm. I had a lot of questions about who I was and where I came from. And it wasn't until I was probably 18 or 19 when she finally revealed what papers she had. Mm-hmm. And apologized for not having shared it before. So.
Okay. How about just education? What's your background?
My background's very eclectic. Mm-hmm. I've gone to 6 colleges and universities. I have 1 certification from the University of Pacific, but I never seem to stay long enough in one city to finich up, which I regret, but that's the way it was.
I keep telling you I'll give you my degree.
Yeah, right. Right, exactly. Now, I was licensed as clergy in 77, and with Metropolitan Community Church, and have continued in ordained ministry to this day.
Okay. And that was my next question, was looking at that religious piece. What denomination or background did you grow up? How did that evolve? Or what did that evolve?
My parents, like I said, being of good German descent, came through the United Church of Christ, which was a little bit unusual in that part of California. I actually, when I was 18, came out to Pennsylvania and did a training program for specialized ministries in Pottstown, and did some of the work here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. But when 1974 came along, by that time I knew I was gay. I had known I was gay from the time I was about 13. And by the early 70s, I was in a relationship. And the major thing that was missing, well, the 2 major things that were missing was a good church home and some answers around my birth parents. Mm-hmm. So in 1974, we found Metropolitan Community Church, and I've never left it.
Okay. All right. We're gonna kind of, first up, in terms of relationships, that was the other piece in this. Family connections. Are you still involved with family members, with with your sister, with,
Oh, very much.
okay, right.
Yeah, very much. My sister has been present at my first relationship blessing,
She was a
and
witness.
she was a witness. And at our most recent wedding, she couldn't attend, but we were on the phone the day before.
Okay. All right. We're gonna start moving toward talking about current family, and that we'll get to one of the topics. Or the primary topic is in talking about your relationship with Amanda. Can we just go ahead and hit off for a moment? Okay, all right. And I'm back again. This is Mary Merriman, and I'm back again with Arlene Ackerman on the right, Jacquie Bogle Ackerman on the left. And we've been talking about some of their history in growing up and becoming aware of their own sexual identity. But now we're going to shift circles and talk about family today, especially who's in the family. And there's lots of pictures here. But if you can just talk about who's family today, and there are a couple of events that we'll be hitting on, in particular, marriage and adoption.
Well, in 1988, we decided we wanted to adopt, and we researched. We were living in Minneapolis at the time. Arlene was pastoring a church there. She did what she's really good at, and she called around to every agency in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area to ask their policy on adopting two lesbians. And I think she
Excuse me,
talked.
you were adopting two lesbians?
No.
I actually
had
called
to.
all over the state.
Yeah. Well, their policy on arranging an adoption for lesbian parents.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mary. And she found 3, I think, out of at least a dozen that she talked to that said yes, they would work with us, but she would need to adopt and apply as a single parent. So I forget exactly why we chose the one we did, whether it was closeness or maybe we even put in 3 applications, I'm not sure, but only one ended up responding positively to the application. And so we started the process, I think that was in August of '88. And by October, Arlene had been on television in a very positive expose on Positively Minnesotan is what it was called, and she was one of the first guests that was featured. And that same week we appeared live on a noontime talk show as a long-term same-sex female couple. That was also very positive. Someone in her adopting class saw us on television, contacted the agency, said, whatever, did you know you're working with a lesbian? And our agency began to put hurdles up. And they put up many hurdles. We got the home study done, and they even after that, they put up more hurdles. By December, they said there might be a possibility of 2 infants that were available that in another state, and within 4 or 5 days, they had gone to someone else. By January, they had fired our social worker from the agency and reassigned us to another social worker who happened to be her husband. I think that was January or February. And Arlene ended up then, they had also required us to have an addendum to our home study, which stated that because we were a same-sex couple, there was no guarantee we were going to stay together. So we were going to use the kid as an exhibit of some form to further our cause. There was very strange things, and We could not prevent them from sending the addendum when they sent the home study. And so what we did instead was add a letter. Whenever they sent the home study out with the addendum, they had to notify us. So we sent a letter, follow-up letter, that spoke to each of the 5 things, the negative things that were listed in the addendum, and pointed out things like, did you look at the national divorce rate right now, and that being recognized legally by the state does not guarantee that you're going to stay together long enough to raise a child. Lots of people will go on the radio and on TV. Doesn't mean they're holding their children up as examples of whatever their cause is, and like that.
We addressed each of the
the bullet
the
points that
addition.
they had on the addendum.
Wow.
And then the other thing with the new social worker, the work to find an agency that would work with our agency to provide us with the adoptive child stopped basically doing anything. So Arlene did, again, what Arlene does really well, and she found out what she needed to do to find someone to work with our agency, and she called all over the country and gave them the case scenario and said, will you work with us? And found a few agencies that said yes. And I was ready to give up hope in February, and finally, and we just kept slogging. It was difficult. It was very much a roller coaster. In April, finally, we got a call that there was an agency in Georgia that had a baby that was available, and
Jackie, April of what year?
1989.
Okay.
And the social worker called us to give us her vitals, and we were like, he was saying, are you interested? And we were like, absolutely, totally. And the last vital statistic he gave us was her birth date, which happened to be our anniversary date. So we were like, yeah, what do we have to do?
Mm-hmm.
Her name is Amanda. She came home 20 days later after she was born. She came home when she was 20 days old. She's from Atlanta. I flew to Atlanta to pick her up. Arlene put the crib together that we had borrowed while I was going to Atlanta. I spent 20 minutes in Atlanta to get her. And she's been our miracle kid. And she's grown up a little. That's her college graduation picture there. She just graduated in May with a degree in art history, with a focus on curatorial work. She likes to set things up, exhibits, and do that sort of work, administrative kind of stuff. And she's just now, in November of last year, she received or responded to notice that she had actually been receiving that she thought was a scam, and she finally called the number to check because it was from Atlanta, and it turned out to be the adoption reunion agency in the city of Atlanta, and her birth mother was looking for her, and they said, do you want to talk to her? And Amanda said, absolutely. And that was in November of 2013, the week before Thanksgiving. So Amanda, when she talked to the agency, said, yes, I would love to talk to her. And the agency said, okay, you have to fill out this paperwork so that we can make the final connection. She got the paperwork, and there was a handwritten letter from her birth mother. That was supposed to have only non-identifying information in it, but they didn't white out everything. Her mother was a chef and had her own restaurant, and they left part of the restaurant's name, which was her mother's name, in the letter, and they left her mother's partner's name in the letter. So Amanda and I, she in Baltimore, because that's where she went to college, and I here, got on our computers, the Saturday before Thanksgiving, and researched, put in the name, to see if we could find the restaurant in Atlanta and see if it was that person. Did they have that partner's name? And sure enough, very quickly, we found her birth mother. She went to bed wondering, okay, now I have to fill out this paperwork. And she called us the next morning and said, I have the phone number for the restaurant. Can't I just call it? So she ended up doing that after much discussion. And
She waited until.
she waited until afternoon on Sunday. And
after I came home and
yeah,
talked with
after
her.
we all had a chance to talk about it, because Arlene was adopted, I was not, so I wanted her to be involved in that question that Amanda had about whether she should go ahead and contact her birth mother immediately. So when she called the restaurant, her birth mother had left about an hour before. Their restaurant only serves breakfast and lunch, and it was 3 or 4 in the afternoon by then. The manager of the restaurant said, I can't call her because she laundered her cell phone last week, and so, but I'll find her and I will make sure she knows, because she's been excited to hear from you, because the reunion agency had let her know that, yes, your birth daughter wants to talk to you. When they finally went to her birth mother's home, she was unconscious, and she ended up never regaining consciousness. So Amanda never got to speak to her birth mother, and it was devastating on many different levels. But the wonderful thing is that her birth mother, turns out, is quite an icon in the Atlanta gay and lesbian, punk, skateboarding, rockabilly, all kinds of different kind of fringe communities. She was
A character.
and is very well known. The family flew us to Atlanta for her funeral, and there were over 1,000 people that attended. She's an icon and very, very well loved. So this week, Amanda and her boyfriend are moving to Atlanta because she's just graduated, and she has opportunities, I think, that are better there than here for her career, and she has a whole group, a whole huge network of people that work in the kind of work that she wants to do. Plus she has birth grandparents, and both Arlene and my parents are long gone, so she's never had grandparents. So
She's got a lot of big family to reconnect with too.
So a whole new family has sort of emerged.
yeah.
But we've also had our own family, which I think is true of most gay and lesbian people, is if we don't have birth family that are supportive and nearby, we create family. And I think we set about and created family. We did so in Minneapolis, and we've done so here. And two of the closest are sitting in this room.
Thank you. One of the things, though, it's never easy, is it? When you came to Lancaster, you managed to pick up a baby in Atlanta. You were there for 40 minutes, did you say? You're putting together a crib, and just kind of did this whole span of life that's about 24 years long. When you came to Lancaster, then you were the adoptive parent. This was a single parent adoption, or you were?
Arlene was
I was
Okay.
the parent.
And
Okay.
we had tried, they would only allow one adoptive parent because we weren't legally married.
Uh-huh.
And we tried to rectify that in Minnesota before we left, and it would have cost us way more than we could afford just to give the attorney a retainer to start the process.
And it would have been.
It would have failed.
It would have failed.
Okay.
And
was
then-
every indication we had been given at that point.
And then when we moved here in '92, Amanda was
hold,
3.
hold on a second. There was very good reason why Jackie went to Atlanta to pick up Amanda, and it was because she knew how to change diapers on an airplane. I had no clue yet how to do that. I mean, I'm teachable, but I need more than 10 minutes.
You're good on the crib.
I'm really good on the crib. And the reason we didn't have the baby's room set up is we had gone through this great elation about there's a baby for you, and then being told a few days later, no, that's all fallen apart. And that actually happened a number of times, to the point that people were saying, here you can have the crib, here you can, we'll bring you this. And we finally said, folks, hold on to things. We know what we're going to need to buy. The one thing we knew about for sure was the crib,
We borrowed that.
right? It was a borrowed crib. And we finally said, look, we'll set it up when we know for sure that the baby's coming. We could not bear in our souls to have everything set up and then be told one more time that the baby wouldn't be coming home. It was just too hard.
Okay. Can you talk what it means, though, for one person to be identified as the adoptive parent in a relationship that was already a longer-term relationship?
Yeah. We had been together 9 years.
And
we
why did they
started
do that then?
process, and it was not legal in
They were
Minnesota.
crazy.
When we came to Pennsylvania in '92, we tried
They were
then.
crazy too.
We tried to get a co-adoption, a co-parent recognition. And it was like, no, there's no way.
And why?
Fine,
What was the problem?
because we weren't legally married. That was...
Okay, so it was the legal
Yeah,
relationships
we
That's
weren't
together.
legally married. And they didn't recognize... We could have done... Finally, when Amanda was 13 or 12, we tried one more time, and the judge's ruling to us on paper, we never went before the judge, but we got an explanation of why we were being turned down, was that I could adopt Amanda as long as Arlene gave up her parental rights, because the state of Pennsylvania couldn't recognize us as co-parents because there was no legal relationship between us, and our attorney had tried to say this is his interpretation of the Constitution was that we should be allowed this, and the judge said no, that's not what they meant when they passed that legislation. Therefore, I'm not going to grant this unless Arlene gives up her rights.
And the bottom line was there was no way we were going to give up any rights after what we had gone through for the possibility of gaining co-parental rights. Because what if, the big what if is, what if they took away my parental rights, then we
Take
could
Amanda.
lose our daughter. And there was no way we're going to do that.
And the terrorism for me, there was one point where we had an appointment with an attorney. We'd had it for months. And the appointment was in early January, and I don't remember the year. But he called us just before Christmas that year, and it was right here in Lancaster County. And there had been some news right then about gay rights, and I don't even know if it was about gay marriage, but it was about gay rights, and so there had been a lot of news media and talk in the Lancaster County area about whether or not we should be recognized, or we were anti-Christian, or that we were going to hell, or whatever the issues that can come up around that. And he called us and he said, I'm really sorry, but I've been thinking about our appointment, and I realize I cannot represent you. Because, as he explained it, my interpretation of his explanation is he couldn't go face his family at Christmas and have that issue come up and feel safe in saying I'm representing lesbians in a parental co-parenting issue. And that, to me, that was a frightening moment to me. To me, that's terrorism. Because if something had happened to Arlene at that time, in that environment, legally, the judge could have given her to anybody. He might have offered her to Arlene's sister, as Arlene's heir or whatever.
Not a good idea.
But I could maybe trust Arlene, probably trust Arlene's sister to say, "You keep her." But why would I have been put in that position? What was right about that?
Do you remember what year that was?
The adoption finally was possible in 2003, so that had to have been like in 2002, I think, or 2001.
I think 2000. It was closer to 2001.
Probably. And then finally the legislation changed. I think it was in 2003
And changed to?
in Pennsylvania, so that the same parent co-parenting was allowed.
Okay.
And that was due to a case that had a male couple and a female couple that they'd been working with for several years to get the issue clarified. And we knew the women, but we didn't know the men. But I'm
Right.
not sure I can
God
remember
bless
the
them.
women's names. But they broke the ice, or made it possible, set the precedent is what it is. And so as soon as they set the precedent, we started a process to do the parenting thing. And before we went through with that, I changed my last name legally to Ackerman, so that the three of us would have the same last name. And this picture here is that second adoption. That was in June of 2003. And Amanda was 14 years old when I got to adopt her. So it was a long pregnancy.
Very long pregnancy.
Very long. But that's when that happened. And that was, the dam had broken at that point. There was lots of same-sex couples going into the county
And
courthouse.
the judge was very happy that
and very
day.
supportive. Yeah,
And it was a different judge than you had been involved with before?
absolutely.
Okay, so there had been some change
Yeah.
as well across those barriers. When finally the adoption was done in 2003, was there a change in the family at all, do you think? Did you feel, did you sense anything?
It was a change for me. I don't know if it was a change for Amanda and Arlene as much as it was for me, because I felt that the weight was off about, if something happens to her. Now I do have legal rights. Now I felt safe.
Okay, so it was a matter of giving you some sense of power and safety in that.
And for me, I was able to relax a little bit because if something did happen to me, I knew that our family was secure. And my job at that point meant a great deal of travel. And that can be frightening at times. When you're on the road a lot, 2 or 3 times a month, I wanted to know that my daughter and my partner were secure.
Yeah. We had, and that was part of the reason I changed my name too, because even with the adoption being finalized, we knew from experience that having 2 different last names added to the whole issue if there was an emergency. We knew from when Amanda was young and had to be taken to the ER, and they looked at the 2 of us and said, "Which one is her mother?" And we said both, and they went, "Yeah, right." And only let one of us in, so we had to choose.
So there's also a lot of other issues around having a biracial child, which brought those issues up on top of the gay issues. So we've had to overcome a whole list of barriers. But I think we did that. support.
I think you did too. And anything about all of that is going on in Lancaster County. And Lancaster County viewed as very conservative, sometimes ultra-right, conservative Bible. Any other context that makes you think about what did Lancaster have to do with it, Central Pennsylvania? Did that make it better, worse?
Lancaster County, in my opinion, is very mixed in terms of, on one hand it feels very conservative and it seems to vote conservatively, but on a one-to-one basis, I've met a lot of people and interacted with a lot of parents and they're supportive. I mean, I'm not one to just come out to just anybody. I don't come out unless I feel like I have a reason to, but I've had, since we moved here, I've worked for probably 6 or 8 different employers, and most of them, when I interview, I say I'm a lesbian, or I say my partner's a woman, and for the most part, either they just smile and never invite me back, which is fine, or they're like, you're here to work, and that's what's important.
Yeah.
On a one-to-one basis, I feel like I've gotten support in many different ways, and when people take the time to ask about our story and hear some of it, they're very supportive. They're like, how could they do that? Why is it like that? Why, and you just kind of sit and commiserate with one another. But
Well, and even our neighbors, we're now in our third home, and in all of our homes we've had support from our neighbors.
Good.
And much of that had to do with, did we take care of our yard?
well, and I've also had employers here in the county when I tell them that I'm a lesbian. I usually don't put it that way because lesbian's a trigger word for so much. But maybe say that my partner's a woman or whatever. And I've had employers or prospective employers say, "Why would you tell me that?" Or that doesn't matter? And I say, "Yes, it does."
Why is that important?
Why is that important? Well, because one real example is that I said, well, on Friday she has a procedure, an outpatient procedure, and I need to go with her, so I'm going to need a half a day off. So it is real important. It is a part of my reality, and it becomes a part of yours if I'm your employee.
Just in terms of the co-adoption, anything else that you'd like to add that kind of crossed your mind that maybe I didn't ask, that was going through a lot of topics? Because it's an amazing story.
It was emotional. It was expensive.
Yeah, it cost $900 for me to have my last name changed. Now, if one of us were a man and we got married, it's what, $60?
Well, and we also believed we'd never be able to get legally married, or we would have waited.
Right. So we didn't do that till June of this year.
So
We waited a while.
So let's move to that topic, because the story evolves.
yes,
From
it does.
1988 to starting adoption to beginning to evolve and then moving to Lancaster and the co-parenting thing, and Amanda growing up wonderfully and getting through college. A whole lot of people that have looked at gay adoption over the years said, oh, I can't do that. Those kids aren't going to be successful, and that's totally been
wrong.
debunked. Yeah.
Now, there's a part of me that wishes Amanda were here because I'd like to hear her perspective about
Right.
growing up with 2 moms. But I
Yeah.
do know that there were times as a parent in this family where I would ask her when she was in school, are you having any problems? Are the kids giving you a hard time? Is there anything you want to talk about? And she was always very reticent about any of that. But then sometimes I would hear her talking to someone else, somewhere else, and it would turn out that she'd been called out, you know. And then there was the issue, the first time she had a sleepover of a group of girls, and I said, do they know you have two moms? I said this like 3 days out from the sleepover. And she stopped and she looked at me and she said, well, yeah. And I said, all of them? Do they, you know, I know some of them know because they've been to our house. And she was like, why is that important? I said, it's going to be important because they may get here or their parents may drop them off and, you know, lots of things can happen. And by that point we had been, I think one of the turning points for her in understanding the difference of having two moms was having gone to the African American Museum in Washington, D.C., and they had an exhibit on slavery, and she got a new perspective and a new understanding of what it was like to have been a slave and how it related to her and her ethnicity. And we had talked about those things, and she had really gotten in touch with how unfair that whole thing was. And so she then related that to how unfair it was for people to think differently of us because we were two women. So there was that moment of having to adjust as a parent how you're bringing your kid up and putting your kid in a position of, I have to come out to my friends before I can have them over.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was another moment in time, I don't even know if Arlene's aware of this. I think Amanda was about 11 or 12. I was working for a Catholic church at that time, and she was coming to work with me for the day because her school was out and I still had to work. Arlene was out of town. On the way to the church, I had to say to her, you need to not talk about Mommy, who's
Mm-hmm.
Arlene, because these people don't know that my partner, they know I have you, that you're my daughter, they know I have a partner, but they assume it's a man, and we need them to continue that. We don't, you know, I didn't want it to blow up into something else. And I felt so awful
Mm-hmm.
that I was telling my kid to lie. It's not right.
No, it's not.
It's not fair, and she shouldn't have had to learn that stage. You know, you get to learn that kind of nuance when you get to be much older. But to tell an innocent kid you can't be honest about your parents because somebody else might not agree with it.
What did she say?
She said, okay. And she was fine. She went on. You know, she did what she was asked to do. She accepted it as this is how we have to deal with this. And she didn't take it as, you know, Mom's telling me to lie. I did.
Right.
I think Amanda did some amazing transitions right around that age. Part of it was transferring out of the school district and getting involved in the charter school that she got involved in, and theater, and all the gifts that emerged from it. But I always felt that the greatest gift was the two of you and what she had already brought into herself. So however she understands things, she's turned it into a song or a portrait that's just amazing. Yeah.
But she accepted what I said. She, you know, she understood that. Yeah, we have. Okay,
She
we
knew
gotta
the
do
history.
this. We gotta do this because Mom says this is
Yeah.
how people are.
Yeah,
So, like I said, it was me that was upset
yeah,
that I'm telling my kid to lie about something.
yeah.
But she somehow got it all.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was starting to date boys, and if they weren't supportive of gay people, she didn't date them again.
Well, she started standing up to people on the bus when she was in
That's
elementary
right.
school when they would call something gay or talk about the Spice Girls being lesbians.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't do that. It's like saying people are niggers, and you don't do that. So,
Yeah, she's, as I think you've just said, she's very strong-willed.
Mm-hmm.
She's very strong-willed. She's very talented, and she speaks her mind.
Mm-hmm. Can we go on, or do you want to take a break?
we're good.
Okay. I think the last topic then that I really want to get to is, of course, the other big change is marriage.
Mm.
All right, now, we all had an agreement. We were all waiting for Pennsylvania. None of us thought it would ever happen.
Our marriage.
Your marriage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I keep waiting for hers.
No.
I'm sorry.
No, hers will come one day, whenever she's ready. So you were married in this year?
On June 20th of 2014.
Okay.
And that occurred, I mean, we were waiting until it was legal in Pennsylvania, but we also both turned 65 this year. And Arlene's much older than I am. Her birthday's in February.
I'm 6 months
Mine's in
older.
August, so she is much older. But I decided we should take a vacation, even though it was a big financial stretch for us. And so I, unbeknownst to her, made plans to spend a week at a cabin, or in a cabin in North Carolina in June. And so when I gave it to her for her birthday, we talked about it then off and on in ensuing weeks. And I said, gee, wouldn't it be fun if North Carolina had legalized gay adoption? And of course, they're still
Gay
working on
marriage.
it. Gay marriage.
Gay
Yeah.
marriage.
And because then we could have our honeymoon, you know, in this nice little romantic cabin. And a few nights later, Arlene said, well, you know, it's legal in Washington, D.C., and D.C.'s on the way to North Carolina. So,
Those are really the good decisions for how you get married, right?
well, we
Yeah,
had
but
known for years.
understand something.
We got married 32 years ago.
We did.
In a holy union.
In our minds, we got married many, many years ago when we had our holy union, and
And that
for
clarifying
us,
for others
for
that won't know
us,
that.
that was our wedding. It was a religious ceremony done in our church with one of our pastors.
With witnesses.
You would have thought it was a regular wedding,
Mhm.
and the only thing was that it had no legal rights whatsoever. But it did bring with it all of the spiritual rights and blessings
And commitment.
and commitment. So having this wedding now, this year, meant for us finally bringing the legal rights, and especially at our age, where we really want to be sure that the other one is protected. So having it, we never really expected this to be the wedding we never had. In our minds, we had it.
Mhm.
What was so amazing about this wedding is that it turned into being as emotionally significant, powerful, in ways I hadn't expected. I felt those first time around. I thought this would be a little more, we called it an elopement. We
Because we didn't
we
invite a bunch of
invited
people.
9 people, and that was plenty. Our closest of friends were there. So this was going to be a very quick ceremony. for legal reasons.
And the day,
Turned into being much more than that for us.
the day that we got our license in D.C. was actually the day that it became legal in Pennsylvania, that the judge overturned the prior ruling. So we kind of chuckled about that.
Yes.
But we got married in
You know,
D.C.
it was on the
anyway.
way to North Carolina.
Yeah, it worked
That's
out.
right. That's right. So our life has been an interesting journey, there's no question. And for us, I think the great lesson is don't ever wait for the world to give you all of your legal rights. You pursue what is right for you, and you keep working at it. And somehow God blesses. Other people are working on rights about the time you've either given up or you've spent 20 years working on things, and now the young'uns are the crusaders, thank God. And times are changing, you know?
Well, I think another bonus for, and another reason I really wanted to make it legal was the whole issue of inheritance. Because, you know, we've both been very
Not that we have
judicious
much.
in getting life insurance for one another so that the other one will be protected if something happens. But we had to put it in Amanda's name as the beneficiary in order to avoid taxes. Because without the legal recognition, you know, I could leave it to Arlene, but she would have had to pay taxes on the inheritance. So now we don't have to do that.
So like 15%, I think it is.
It's puts you.
See,
It depends what tax
non-legal.
bracket it puts you in. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy. Fading fast. Okay. Are there other things that you would like to add to this? We've only got about 10, 15 minutes, I think.
No, I'm just glad that somebody's taking note of what history has been doing.
Yeah.
I always thought you can't read this in a textbook. I've read stuff in a textbook that people wrote about LGBT history, and it doesn't come the same way. It's
No.
not the experience history.
Yeah.
So I love this project.
Yeah. And it's one of oral history is, I think, like you said, much more valuable in so many ways. And I am, another thing we've talked about many times, and we've talked with you about, is I never thought this would happen, that gay marriage would be legalized. I figured the discussion was going to go on ad infinitum, and now that states are falling like dominoes, what's become clear to me is that the majority of people, I think, again, on an individual basis, have been supportive all along, but weren't courageous enough or interested enough.
There wasn't enough momentum, I think, for
There
them to
wasn't enough
speak.
momentum on the power levels, and
Yeah.
because now the judges, when they write their rulings in many different states, what I've read from the rulings is that, you know, yes, there's absolutely no reason we should be denying these people their rights. And I think, what, you didn't think that 2 years ago?
Yep,
Still
politically not popular.
It still concerns me that rights are different in state to state, and that is still wrong.
And that everything is on appeal to the Supreme Court, so we're waiting for the next chapter to see how it's going to come out.
Exactly.
Yeah, to see if we're
Yeah.
in a window or if the door is actually
Yeah.
open and staying open. Yeah.
Who would have thought? When I was coming out in '74, I expected none of this. None of this. I did not think I would see this day. So,
Well, praise God we are here.
that's right.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your time, and we're going to conclude this interview.
Thank you.